When people think of horror movies, the first thing that comes to their minds are the iconic slashers of the past. Those movies so well known for their corny cliches, masked killers, and their over-the-top kills. But when you ask those people which was the movie that first popularized this movie genre, most of them will point the finger at John Carpenter's 1978 cult classic, Halloween. While it is true that this movie was a big contributing part of the slasher craze of the 70s, Michael Myers is more of a older brother to those who came after him compared to the true father of slasher horror. Of course, I'm talking about the crazed, chainsaw-carrying cannibal himself, Leatherface, from the 1974 Tobe Hooper cinema masterpiece, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
And I run it. And I run it. And I run it. And I run it. That's ironic. I run it. That's ironic. I run it.
Salt all of my wounds, hear my tears, all of my tunes. Let my life loose in this booth, just for you, motherfucker. Hope y'all amused.
Sup, y'all? Welcome to another episode of the G.D.S.V Horror Cosplaying Guide channel. On today's episode, we'll look at Leatherface from the first Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie. This episode will be very dense in information and sections because in the movie, Leatherface sports 3 different appearances throughout. The first one being the Butcher, the second one being the Old Lady, and the third and final one being the Pretty Woman. I will go in depth on each appearance as they appear in the movie. But before I do, I will need to tell you about the pieces of clothing that Leatherface uses that go unchanged throughout the entirety of the movie. Let's call these articles of clothing the central outfit. Real quick before we talk about the central outfit and all that shit, the way this video is gonna work is as follows. I'm gonna give a brief overview on the central outfit, all the appearances in order, and Leatherface's weapons. Then, I'm gonna start over and talk in depth about every single costume piece or prop in order, using all the knowledge I was able to acquire about them. I'm gonna give tips and tricks on how to make them whenever possible. So yeah, watch the whole goddamn video, okay? Okay, so now let's take a look at the central outfit. The central outfit is composed of a white shirt-sleeve formal shirt with blue pinstripes that has been dyed a peachy color using Ritz dyes. A pair of dark blue dress pants that appear to have been shortened at the ankles to avoid bagging at the cuffs, by sewing the excess fabric to the inside of the legs, leaving a straight sewing line all the way around, about 5 to 6 centimeters above the cuff of the pants. An old pair of worn-out, pointed-toe black cowboy boots with a squared-off tip outsole and a plant-like design on the shaft. A vintage bell bracelet with a circular metal plaque attached to it. Penn's bracelet is an optional accessory for his first appearance, the Butcher, since Leatherface only starts using it after he impales Pem on the meat hook and steals it from her. A short and wide dark blue tie with a unique silver scalloped curve design painted all across its length. And lastly, the fake teeth prosthetic that the actor of Leatherface, the late Gunnar Hansen, used during the role. It appears that they made only a denture for his upper teeth, since the lower teeth are never shown during the movie. The fake teeth on the denture were crooked and filed at the ends to have 2 points. Okay, so that was all the components of the central outfit. With that out of the way, I don't need to repeat the same shit when listing the pieces of the costume for each appearance. I'll just refer you back to this section. Now, let's move on and talk about the components of each appearance in order, starting with the Butcher. This is the first appearance Leatherface sports in the film. It's the appearance he uses whenever he is killing people in the movie, hence the name. It also is the appearance that clocks the most amount of screen time, making it the most iconic out of all the three. Here's what it's composed of. The central outfit. We just went over this shit, but if you have Alzheimer's, go back and see what its components are. A vintage yellow butcher's apron made out of vinyl with a cotton neck strap and a chain link to secure it to the waist. It has a generous amount of blood and dirt caked on it. And his iconic mask named the Killing Mask by the community, for obvious reasons. What can I really say about it? Whether you know anything about the movies or not, this mask is so iconic that it most likely has crossed your view at least once in your life. It is a heavily stretched, dry skin mask that has been designed to have both aesthetics and functionality in mind. Having a big smile held by metal wires to make it easier to breathe while chasing, eyes that are stitched wide open to better see your target, and rectangular pieces of leather replacing the ears so that it can block some of the noise from the chainsaw. Truly a killer's mask. The Old Lady. Okay, now let's go over the second appearance Leatherface uses in the movie, that being the Old Lady. It received this name because some years ago, some of the brightest minds of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre community sat together in a dark room to watch the newly released 4K version of the film, in hopes to discover new and never seen before details in the movie. And after many rewatches, they made the great discovery that Leatherface was in fact dressed as a old lady. This appearance of Leatherface is one that has the least amount of screen time in the movie, making it the least popular out of the three. This appearance is composed of the central outfit. If your TikTok brain forgot what this was in this short amount of time, you can always just go back to its section and watch again. A light blue vintage kitchen apron with 2 front pockets. It was made with a very unique fabric, and its pattern is quite complex. A wooden spoon. That's right, Leatherface needs a good wooden spoon to stir that big-ass bowl of chili his family is so well known for. The spoon mostly stays in the right front pocket of the kitchen apron, with the handle sticking out. The Old Lady Mask. Like said before, because this appearance has such a low screen time, this mask is really not that popular with fans of the movie. So you won't see people making replicas of this mask or dressing up as Old Lady Leatherface in high frequencies. But that's fine, cause only those few true men who know the happiness that comes with dressing as a frail and old buff granny are a part of this mask's appreciation club. The Pretty Woman. Leatherface's third and final appearance in the movie, The Pretty Woman, was given that name during the same watch sessions of the 4K release of the movie with the greatest minds of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre community. What happened was that for the first time in their lives, they saw what seemed to be the mythical creature called a woman. And because this woman was marginally prettier than their moms, they unanimously called her the Pretty Woman. They then would find out that the woman they saw was in fact Leatherface. This appearance is composed of the central outfit. If you still remember what this is, congrats, your attention span is greater than that of a goldfish. A undersized navy blue velvet blazer with some makeup powder stains on the lapel. Note, this blazer needs to be a slightly lighter shade of blue compared to the blue of the dress pants. And lastly, the Pretty Woman mask. the second most popular mask out of the three, and rightfully so, as it is the creepiest one in the movie in my opinion. There's something unnerving about seeing the mutilated face of a woman stretched on top of that of a cannibal, who is following the old Southern tradition to dress up nice for dinner. Not to mention the manic makeup job put on top of it to make it look pretty, but instead making it look like Michael Jackson. And that is the scariest thing of all. Okay, and that was all the appearances of Leatherface shown in the movie. Now that we got all the costuming out of the way, we can start talking about Leatherface's tools of the trade. Of course, I'm talking about his iconic weapons. And those are as follows. The hammer. The first weapon we see Leatherface use during the film is his sledgehammer. To be specific, it is a vintage cross-pen blacksmithing sledgehammer with ornamental grooves at the points of the pen. The chainsaw. The namesake weapon of the film, the chainsaw, is a controversial topic within the community of the movie, because nobody can agree on what the exact chainsaw model used in the movie is. But, as a great thinker once said, there are two groups within this debate. The ones who believe the chainsaw is a Poland 245A, and those who are wrong. I originally wrote a big-ass script for this section with all kinds of fucking different arguments, but I honestly can't be fucking bothered to record that shit. In my books, the original chainsaw was a 1973 barn yellow Poland 245A. Deal with it. Okay, now that I briefly covered every topic, I will go into great detail over every prop in the order they were first mentioned. And so, the first item I'm going to cover is the shirt. In Gunnar Hansen's book, The Chainsaw Confidential, he described the shirt as being an old, striped, short-sleeve shirt, and that the production team of the film later dyed the shirt to tone it down. I was also told by a reputable source that the stripes on the shirt were confirmed to be in fact a light blue color. And, as for how the shirt was worn, in the film, Leatherface's shirt had the top two buttons unbuttoned, and instead, he used his tie to tighten the collar. With this much info, I had enough to start my research. After some time researching the topic, I came to the conclusion that the shirt used must have been made with a thin fabric like a 100% cotton or a polycotton, as opposed to a more thicker kind of fabric like a Oxford. I came to this conclusion because it is shown in the movie that the fabric of the shirt is thin enough to let light pass through it really easily. I also found out that a good proportion to replicate the style of the shirt is to have stripes that measure 1 millimeter with a spacing between them of approximately 14 millimeters. But that's really a really extreme detail. If you find a similar shirt with blue pinstripes at a good cost, just fucking buy it. It's just a shirt anyway. But make sure you get it at the biggest size available. 'Cause in the movie, that shit was floating on Gunnar. Like, it's really loose on him. And he's a big dude. I made a pattern for a replica shirt that has a great estimate on the measurements of the real deal. So you can use it for comparison on what you're gonna buy, or to make your own replica. Have fun with it, I guess. The type of dye used to turn the shirt from white to a peachy color was apparently confirmed by someone in the crew of the film to have been red dyes. What color in specific is a mystery, but Crystal Lake Creations on Instagram said that he used the camel color to dye his shirt and got a pretty good color match. But if you are feeling extra brave, you can try and dye your shirt using the same method I did. And that would be by using avocado pits and skins. There are a lot of tutorials on YouTube on how to dye shirts using avocados, and I'll link the best one I found on the description of the video. But the main recommendation I will give you is that you only use the small and dark avocados because they have the most dye. And make sure that you use all of the skin and pit of the avocado, because they have different color dyes. And when you mix both of them together, in my opinion, they make the perfect color. Be sure to wash your shirt first with detergent on hot water so that the fabric can better absorb the dye. I personally used 4 avocados with the recommendations I gave you, and my shirt got a pretty good color match if I do say so myself. But please, just keep in mind that this method is far from standardized, so results may and probably will vary. As a quick side note, I found a post on Facebook made by someone claiming that the original shirt used in the film has been found and may be in a private collection as of today. But I found no further information on the topic in my research, and the person who made the claim still has not responded to my questions. So for now, this is a dead end, unfortunately. The next item I'm going to talk about are the pants. The ones used in the movie were a pair of navy blue dress pants. They were used throughout the entirety of the film, and so they accumulated a lot of wear and tear. Aside of them being dirty, by the end of the film, when you see Leatherface perform his iconic chainsaw dance, you can clearly see a rip under the left pocket on the backside of the pants. The cuffs of the pants had the excess fabric sewn to the inside. And after studying some photos and matching measurements, I was able to find out that the sewing line on the cuffs was probably about 5 centimeters above the cuffs. The original pants used in the movie were probably thrown away since they were so damaged and they were practically unusable. And the crew of the film didn't really think the movie would even be released, so it didn't really make sense to keep a damaged pair of pants that nobody would ever wear again. So I really don't think we'll ever see the screen-used pair today or in the future. But a interesting piece of info that I found on Facebook groups about the film is that there are multiple people who claim that the pants used were Big Mac's navy blue work pants. And when I searched for this style of pants from that brand, I found some on eBay that were indeed really similar to the original ones used on the movie. So there might be some truth to that claim. But if there is, I wasn't able to find it because the info is really obscure. But you decide for yourself. Try and do your own research about it. Now onto the boots. The boots used for the film were a pair of all-black cow leather cowboy boots with pointed toes, black squared point outsoles, and they had a plant-like stitch design on the shaft of the boot. Gunnar Hansen wrote in his book, The Chainsaw Confidential, that the boots used were an old pair he had that was worn out and was eventually resold by the production team of the film to have 3-inch heels. With all that info, and a good amount of reference photos from the film, I was able to find a pretty convincing match after a bit of research. While I was searching for vintage cowboy boots on eBay, I found an old pair of boots made by Justin Boots that had a really similar stitch design. So out of curiosity, I tried matching the designs. And believe it or not, they match really well aside from some minor differences that can be passed as a factory QC issue. So, I started searching for more vintage boots made by the Justin brand to see what else I could find. And boots with the same stitch design made by Justin are really common to find, surprisingly. But more importantly, I found a all-black cow leather boot with the exact same stitch design. But it doesn't have the pointed toes. That means it's not the same model, right? Well, not necessarily. Remember, the soles on the original boots were changed by the production team of the film. And when you resole a boot, it's not like playing with Legos. You can't just remove it and glue a new one like magic. In boot making, they need to use a shoe last for the appropriate size of the foot when attaching a new sole in order for the boots not to look like fucking shit. And it's not like the person they hire to resole the boots would have the exact same lasts used by the Justin company. So it's not far-fetched to think that they resold the normal toe boots with a pointed toe last for convenience. But I personally don't think these are the exact same model boots used in the movie. I was also able to find another brand of boots that has the exact same stitch design, but they make Velcro boots. I am not sure if Justin ripped them off or if they ripped off Justin boots, but there could be another different brand selling a boot with the same stitch design. And this brand that I have not found could be the one making the exact model boots for the film. So I am truly unsure of whether or not these are the exact same models. As for where the screen-use boots are nowadays, I am uncertain. There are multiple conflicting stories about this subject, but all of them boil down to the boots being lost to time. The most plausible story I found out of the bunch is that Gunnar threw them out because they started to rot away. So yeah, don't hold your breath expecting that they will resurface one day. Now let's talk about the bracelet that Pam uses, and that Leatherface later steals for himself. This is a very complicated prop. It has multiple different trinkets and doodads attached to it, and they are really hard to make out due to it not being shown up close too much. And the low quality footage of the 16mm film from back then doesn't really help the situation. But I went on a mission to find some decent reference pictures of the damn thing. And from what I could gather, the bracelet itself is made from those slightly bent chains, like the one I'm showing on screen right now. Another interesting thing I found is what appears to be a pearl near the top of the bracelet. It looks like a pearl to me because even in an angle where shadows should be visible, it's still shining. so it must be translucent or highly reflective. Also, the clasp mechanism on the bracelet is shaped like a tube. I researched clasp mechanisms that best fit this type, and I came across something that is really similar and plausible, named the screw clasp. It's really similar in the shape to the one in the photos, and it's the one that makes the most sense in practicality, since the bracelet must have been really heavy without those trinkets. A heavy-duty clasp would have been the best choice for it. The most notable trinket that is attached to the bracelet is this round metal tag. It has a little raise at the top for the hole in the tag to be attached, and it's being held up by what appears to be a small carabiner. I'm not really sure on that one, but the shape is really similar, so do keep that in mind. The bracelet also has bells on it, as the name implies. You know, the Bell Bracelet. As for the quantity of bells on it, I don't have a precise number, but I think it's around 8 to 10 bells. From the footage I researched, it appears that the metal tag is placed right in the middle of the bracelet, and that each side of the bracelet has up to 4 or 5 bells, and some pearls placed in between them. Also, the bells are stacked pretty close to each other in the middle, leaving the top of the bracelet really bare. There are some people out there who sell replicas, but I personally just made my own bell bracelet, and I honestly recommend you do the same. It's not that hard, it's actually kinda cheap, and also really fun, so you should give it a try. You'll just need 2 of these things to bend the chains and shit. Now, as for the screen use bracelet, there's absolutely no info on what happened to it. So I think it's just like lost to time in some random person's basement. But I did find something interesting. A user on a TCM Facebook group posted photos of a vintage bell bracelet they bought a while back, and it's strikingly similar to the one used in the film. I don't think it's the same one. Actually, it has some differences, but it's really close. It really looks the part. So maybe the bracelets were mass produced or something. I don't know. But on the worst case scenario, you could like use it as a reference. So yeah, there it goes. The next item is the tie. The one used in the movie was most likely a customized normal tie. That is not a far off thought to have, since it was stated by Ed Neal, aka the Hitchhiker, that most of the costuming for the film were just old clothes that the cast already had, or clothes that they found on a thrift store. But some of the clothes used in the movie were indeed made for production. And I was able to find a section in Gunnar Henson's book, The Chainsaw Confidential, that described that the tie used in the film was a goofy blue tie with a scalloped silver curve painted on it. The tie was most likely done by Bob Burns, since he was the art director of the film. My personal theory is that they went to a thrift store and bought a normal blue tie, then they handed it to Bob Burns, which he then proceeded to paint the design to make it more striking on film. With not much info to go off of, I basically just started experimenting to see what worked best to replicate the look of the tie in the film. And I also started matching measurements to try and get a good estimate of the size. What I concluded was that the tie used probably had a 10 centimeter wide tongue. And it was also kinda small, being around 130 centimeters tall. So, I made a file with a sewing pattern for it, and a file with the painted design of the tie. I tried to replicate the design of the tie as close as possible using set photos, so that it could look as accurate as possible to the original when used alongside the sewing pattern I made. One file is going to be for a visual reference, and the other is going to be a template for painting the silver scalloped curve on the tie. For the white border lines on the curve, they are about 0.45 centimeters in thickness on the file. So keep that in mind when painting. But don't be too adamant on perfectionism, since the white border lines on the screen used tie are actually uneven in thickness, since they were hand painted. The materials you will need to make the tie are a dark blue linen or cotton fabric for the shell of the tie, a felt fabric for the interlining so that it holds its shape, and for the tipping of the tie, you can reuse the same fabric for the shell, or use a different one in black to make it look more professional. And I think it goes without saying that for painting the design, you should use fabric paints, since they are made for the medium. As for the colors, a metallic silver and a matte white are the most appropriate. Well, that's about it for making the tie. Because I was not able to make one myself due to unforeseen circumstances, I do not have a tutorial to give you made by myself. But I can recommend you a great tutorial on YouTube for sewing ties. It is from a German YouTuber, and it doesn't have subtitles, but trust me, it is so well made and so well filmed that you just need to watch it to understand. The only things I feel are necessary to tell you is that when cutting the pieces of the tie on the fabric, you should always cut them on the true bias of the fabric, so that when you start using the tie, it will not lose its shape over time. The true bias of the fabric is a specific orientation of the fibers that makes it hold its shape well over time, even under stress. For more details, I recommend you Google it. Another thing of note is that unlike the video, the tipping in my pattern is not small, so you can sew both parts together with no extra hassle. I did this because after some research and deconstructing of real ties, making it small is a completely unnecessary method. So I just made mine the same size as the shell of the tie for convenience. The other thing I want to recommend is that you paint the template before sewing the tie. Make sure to paint the first layer using the silver paint all the way to the borders of the template. Then, you paint the white borders on top of the silver layer. I recommend doing it this way because the silver layer will act as a great primer for the white paint. And by putting the silver paint on top of the blue fabric without a primer, it will give the silver layer that blue hue you see on set photos. By the way, the red color the tie gets by the end of the film is not a color correcting error or whatever else could be. It actually turned that color because of the fake blood they used on set. This happened because when they were filming Franklin's death, you can see that the blood starts spurting all over Leatherface's clothes. This effect was achieved by making makeup artist Dottie Pearl, director Toby Hooper, and boom operator Wayne Bell take mouthfuls of Cairo corn syrup with red food dye and spit it at Leatherface while crouched down on the sides of Franklin's wheelchair. While imagining that is funny as shit, getting back on topic, I believe that the corn syrup mixed with the red food dye must have stained the tie, because as the section where Leatherface is chasing Sally through the woods ends, the next time we see him in the old lady outfit, his tie already has that reddish tint. I think that when they filmed Franklin's death, they continued filming until the end of the chase, and then the next day, when filming came around for the family reunion, someone in the production team must have tried to either wash or wipe off the fake blood, but by then, the red food dye must have already stained the paint on the fabric, making it turn red. Lastly, as usual, there is no information on the whereabouts of the screen-used tie. If you were able to make the tie, now it's time to learn how to tie it. But not any tie knot will suffice. The tie used in the movie had a very unique knot, and after a lot of examining and studying the different types of tie knots, I found the one used in the movie. It is a modified version of the half Windsor knot. Look at some reference pictures of the knot compared to the one used in the movie. Notice how one side is smaller than the other and more pointy, and how the collar has the larger side sticking horizontally and the smaller one vertically. Pretty convincing, right? Well, if you have a keen eye, you will notice that in the demonstrative photo of the knot, the pattern of the tie shows on the knot itself, which does not happen on the tie used in the movie. And because of this, you could simply say that the pattern does not run all the way across the entire tie. But that would simply be wrong, since you can clearly confirm the opposite with this photo. See how the specific parts of the tie are showing the colors of the design of the pattern? If you are familiar with tie knots, you will understand that the part that is showing the pattern is at the very opposite end of the tie, meaning that it runs from one end to the other. So, now you may be asking, how is it possible that this is the right knot used if the one used in the movie does not show the pattern on the knot itself? Well, that's where the quote-unquote modified part of the knot comes into play. I was able to make a modified version of the half Windsor knot that perfectly replicates the knot used in the movie. I call it the half Sawyer knot. If you want to learn how to make this knot, you can watch this demonstration made by one of my assistants. I called one of them directly from HQ to help me with this video. This actually will be the first time you'll be seeing him. So, I present you the Minion. Well, actually, I make these fuckers by the masses, so I call all of them that. Yeah, fuck you too. Anyway, Minion will be your dad for today, and he will teach you how to tie a tie. A killer's tie, that is. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is grab the tie you're going to use and pass it through the back of your neck. After doing that, you're going to adjust the tie so that it lays flat on your neck with the side of the tie that has the seam facing outward. Then you will grab the tongue of the tie and pull it so that its length is double that of the smaller end. After doing that, you will grab the smaller end and pass it through the back of the tongue. Then you will grab the tongue and pass it through the back horizontally. And proceed to pass it through the front, through the middle. You can take your time to adjust the knot as you go so that it is as tight as possible throughout the process. Then you will grab the tongue and pass it through the other side. And then, through the front, you will pass it horizontally. And then, through the back, you will pass it through the middle. After this, you will flip the tie so that the normal side is showing. And you will pass it through the loop you just created the step before to finish the knot. After doing this, you will just need to tighten the tie so that it looks good and to your liking. Make sure to pull on all different kinds of places, adjust, loosen, whatever it needs to be done so that it looks good. Because presentation is key. And that's about it. If you had any trouble with this tutorial, I recommend you go on YouTube and search for tutorials on the normal half Windsor knot so that you can learn the basics and then come back here and watch Minion do the knot again. And hopefully it will help you. So yeah, good luck. In some interviews and in his book about the film, Gunnar Hansen stated multiple times that the fake teeth dentures he used for the movie were made by his dentist at the time, Dr. Albert Johnson. He mentioned that his dentist said it would be a straightforward job since he already had a full mouth impression of his mouth. When he received the dentures, Gunnar described it as having quote-unquote baby teeth. Now, I have no clue if they were real baby teeth. They could have been fake resin denture teeth, but it's always gonna be a doubt in my mind, and that's just nasty. Like, seriously, fucking baby teeth? Now, with all that info, I can infer that the method used was most likely based on standard medical dental practice. I don't think the dentures were made using more economic alternatives such as thermoplastics, because when you examine the photos of the fake teeth, the gums seem really shiny, smooth, and transparent, which is a clear sign of acrylic resin dentures. And also, Robert A. Burns, the art director of the film, once said himself that the dentures costed a pretty penny. As for the thieves themselves, again, I am not sure if they are real, but a good alternative is to use resin denture teeth. They don't sell resin baby teeth, but what you can do is you can use the 6 front teeth from the bottom row and try and reshape them to look more like the ones used. The denture used in the movie only ever had the 6 front teeth visible anyway. By the way, none of the teeth used are molars or premolars, since they're kind of flat and don't have points in the back. I would also like to note that even if the denture doesn't have a full set of teeth, I believe that the acrylic gums on the denture went all the way back. that would not only make it fit securely on Gunner's teeth without falling off, but it would also explain why we never see him close his jaw while wearing them, because the extra material would restrict the movement of the jaw by hitting the last molars. If you're going to make one for yourself, you can try and make it out of thermoplastic, since it's a cheaper material and it's easier to work with. And I will provide a YouTube tutorial from another YouTuber on how to make one. But if you're thinking of making a more accurate acrylic resin denture, I recommend you get it made by a dentist. The best way to do so is to make him take a plaster cast of your upper row of teeth. Then you take the cast home with some denture sculpting wax your dentist is used to working with, and then you sculpt the denture using the resin teeth. Once it's done and finalized, give it back to your dentist so that he can mold it and cast it in acrylic resin. As for the current status of the screen-used denture, the only info I found out there is that it was stolen. Well, to be more specific, it states that Gunner was apparently living in a van at some point, and that the van got stolen along with everything inside it, including the dentures. And if that's true, then that thing is pretty much gone. If only the denture was stolen, then there would be hope, because that would imply that the thief would have known the value of it enough to keep a fucking denture. But because the primary thing stolen was the van, most likely it was taken to some workshop to get its license changed or sold for parts, and all the belongings inside it were most likely thrown away. So don't have your hopes up, is what I'm saying. After filming had wrapped up, the original Butcher's Apron Leatherface used in the movie was put in a storage unit along with other original props used in the film in Austin, Texas. But after some time, the storage unit was put up for sale because the owner had not been paying the required fees. The contents of the storage unit, including the apron, were sold to a furniture store, and later on, all the items were sold to Ed Neal, the actor of The Hitchhiker. And after that, the items were given to the Heritage Vintage Movie Poster Auction, where the apron was sold to its current owner, a private collector by the name of Age House of Horrors on Instagram. They posted multiple pictures featuring the butcher's apron used in the film, and made some informative papers about the history of the apron. In it, he tells the story of the multiple owners, as I just told. And he also mentions that Ed Neal confirmed that in the movie, the budget was so low that there was only one of each prop, and that applies to the apron too. At the bottom of one of these informative papers about the prop, the measurements of the screen-use apron are given. So I took them, along with some photos they took of the apron open flat, and made a template pattern to make a screen-accurate butcher's apron. The apron is apparently made from a vinyl material. What exactly was used, I have no idea. But when I tried to search for something similar, the closest material I could find is waterproof vinyl fabric. But any yellow waterproof PVC fabric that is good enough to use as an apron will work. Para os meus irmãos e irmãs, eu recomendo usar um tecido bagum, resistente, que funciona da mesma forma e é bem semelhante. The straps on the apron appear to be a continuous piece of herringbone cotton tape, that is approximately 3.5 to 3.7 centimeters wide, which is sewn to both ends with that weird sewing pattern. If you make one of these, you should decide how long your strap should be to best fit you. The general rule is that it should be long enough to make the top part of the apron cover all but the first 2 buttons of the shirt. You can also use that iconic photo as a fitting reference. The screen-use apron also has a bias material all along its sides that is glued down to the back to reinforce the edges of the apron. I put an extra 1 centimeter of material on the edges of the pattern for you to glue down as a hem. But because this thing has curves and points, you may need to cut and trim some parts of the extra material so it all hems nicely. By the way, in the screen-used apron, the hem at the bottom left area was glued to the front, unlike the rest, so keep that in mind. The way the top part of the apron, along with the straps, is sewn together is quite peculiar. It most likely has some bias material to attach the straps to the apron. Then, you make the weird sewing stitch line to lock it all down. But there is a clearly visible stitch line running horizontally about 5 centimeters below the top. And you can kind of make out the outline of the straps running down to the straight line. My best guess is that the bias material is quite large and goes all the way down to the lines with the strap. It's hard to explain, so I made a little demonstrative drawing to help. A detail most people don't know about the apron is that the waist part is not held by a normal fabric strap, but instead it is held by a thin chain link, as you can see in the photos. While the original chain used in the screen-used apron was not found, presumably being removed afterwards for easier storage, we can see on old photos that the chain link was really thin, possibly to allow the chain to pass through the washers on the sides of the apron. We can also see that the chain was attached to the right washer with a bigger chain link, and that on the left side of the chain, it was left with a dangling piece of extra chain. My theory is that the chain on the left side is not connected directly to the washer. Instead, it is just passed through the hole of the washer and tied down to itself, leaving some extra pieces of chain swinging freely. The washer drawn on the pattern are up to scale with the ones used in the original. The hole in the middle of the washers is about 1 centimeter wide. The last detail that I found worth mentioning is that on the same informative paper made by H House of Horrors, it is stated that on the bottom right of the apron there is a noticeable tear. So I added it to the template with the actual measurement given in case you want to replicate it too. I found it important to add this detail because it is present during most of the filming where it is used, as you can clearly see near his right knee on the scene where he is sitting near a window after killing Jerry. It is a small detail, but it is present during most of the filming, so it is nice to include it if you're going for accuracy. Just make sure to reinforce the ends of the tear so it doesn't get bigger. And that's about it. Smear some dirt, some fake blood on the damn thing, and you're set. Shit is crazy simple to make. And it's super accurate since I got the actual measurements from the original prop. So, whoever is interested in a good Leatherface butcher's apron, go ahead and use this template, and good luck. Like, I'm really glad that H House of Horrors was kind enough to give the measurements of the apron, because not only did it allow me to make a really accurate template, but it also allowed me to have true reference measurements to use so that I could find out other measurements of other costume pieces using set photos. So, big thanks for the kind favor. Believe it or not, the kitchen apron used in the movie is the most mysterious article of clothing in the whole film. You would think it would be the boots, right? Since cowboy boots are such a niche business. But honestly, even the boots have more info about them. This apron, on the other hand, is such a damn enigma, it hurts my fucking brain. The first part of the damn thing that makes me ill is the fabric used in the apron. This fabric used is really specific. I have spent long hours analyzing it, but I'm still not confident on a match. I will still need to do more research to find the answer. The second thing that annoys me about this apron is the sewing pattern. On the outside it looks like a simple double pocket cotton apron, but when you analyze the seams, it has a bunch of weird lines that I can't for the life of me tell if it's a seam line or a fold. For example, on the shoulder straps, it appears to have some extra pieces of fabric sewn to the outer sides of the strap. They seem to have different sizes and starting points, but I am not sure if it is just the fabric stopping or the fabric being stuffed under the straps. Another peculiar thing about this side fabric on the shoulder straps is that it seems to extend down, curve, and become the waist strap. If that were the case, it would explain why you can suddenly see folds on the lower sides of the apron. But again, I am not sure. This is a very fucking weird pattern. A while back, I made a series of questions to a well-informed person in the TCM community, and he told me that after many years of searching for the exact model of apron used in the film, he came to the conclusion that it was one of the few props that was actually commissioned to be made for the movie. Which really says a lot about how weird this apron is. While I do think it is plausible that this theory is true, I just can't shake the feeling that something feels off about the idea of it being a commissioned piece for the film. Most of the articles of clothing used in the movie were found on thrift stores to minimize costs, or just outright have the cast and crew bring their own clothes to the set. They used a metal platter as a safety shield against a chainsaw for Henson's leg in the final act. They fucking spit fake blood at Leatherface during Franklin's death to simulate blood spurts. They used actual skeletons from India as set dressing because it was cheaper. Them making a good quality generic kitchen apron so that it could be used for a handful of scenes seems really uncharacteristic to me. But I have absolutely no clue at this point. One last weird piece of detail about the pattern on this thing that I would like to point out is in the back. The shoulder straps appear to be connected to a almost rectangular piece of fabric that is kinda long. At first, I had no idea what the fuck this could be, but after some research, I found some listings on eBay for vintage kitchen aprons from the 50s, And when you look at the photos that show the back, wouldn't you know it, it has the exact same piece of fabric. And seeing these aprons really showed me the reason this piece of fabric was in the original apron. The rectangular fabric has a little cut on the end so that the user can tie the waist straps to it and secure everything together. Of course, this feature only works if you're a petite woman from the 50s. If you're a big murderous 6.4 brute with a chainsaw, it is to be expected that the damn thing would be too high to even get it tied down together. And this is what really gets me questioning things. 'Cause if it really was a apron made for the film, why would they add an extra detail that would never be properly used in the short amount of time the apron would be used in? Don't get me wrong, it's still very much possible that the prop was made for the film. And if so, holy shit, what great attention to detail. But in my honest opinion, I think what happened was that the apron that was used in the film was originally made in a small quantity by an independent fashion designer or seamstress, or in some small starting business in Texas in the 50s. From there, it could have been that it was bought by a family of someone involved in production, or was sold on a thrift store to someone who was involved in the production, where it would ultimately be used for the costuming of the film. That honestly seems more plausible to me. But again, I have no info to back it up, aside from the fact that it was said that most of the costuming was bought or taken from people from the set. That's just it. Just guessing. So make of that what you will. This section of the video in general is my least favorite because I am still very much lost and unsure of most of the things involving it. So I don't feel like I could give you a good result or answer to most of the questions I presented. But maybe in the future something could change, and if it does, I will make another video to update this section. But for now, this is it. As of today, the status of the apron used on the film is unknown. There is no info available on if it still exists or if it's still out there or where it could be. So yeah, just pure fucking bullshit. The blazer that was used for the film is a single-breasted navy blue velvet blazer with 2 front buttons, 4 cuff buttons, a center vent, and it has white makeup setting powder stains on the lapel and biceps areas of the blazer due to Leatherface manically reapplying the makeup on his Pretty Woman mask in a deleted scene. Of course, all of the info I just gave you is substantiated by visual proof, with both photos and video being available to the public. But I would like to talk a bit more in depth about the claim of it being made from a velvet material. For a long time, I was a bit skeptical about this claim because I would hear and see it be stated by multiple people in the TCM community, but I would never really see a compelling piece of evidence to support the claim. Until I questioned Creepy Customs on Instagram about it, since he was planning to sell some really spot-on looking replicas of the blazer. And in his rendition of the blazer, he uses a velvet material. And he told me that in the 4K version of the film, the velvet sheen of the material is more evident. At first, I thought he might be referring to the makeup stains that are visible during the dinner scene. But when I reanalyzed the movie in 4K, I was able to see what he meant. During the scene where Leatherface is following Sally and Ed Gein, no, not that Ed Gein, that one's a fucking bitch. This one's way cooler because he grabbed a wrench and he yammed that shit on both of Leatherface's faces. And in the frames where Leatherface is falling back from the impact, you can see the sheen from the velvet material of the blazer. So, there it is. Use this info on your search if you're planning on finding a blazer for the costume. By the way, if you find a similar blazer for a good price with a similar color, but that is not velvet, just get it. Just fucking get it, because the velvet effect on the screen used blazer is so weak that we had to have the 4K release to even notice it. So if you find a better option for less money, just get it. But if you're really looking for something that is really accurate, then my recommendation is that you go get the one made by Creepy Customs, because that one is like really spot on. Another important and blatant aspect of the blazer used in the movie is that it is greatly undersized. Like, seriously undersized. Gunner looks like a child whose mom is making him test his old suits because they're going to attend his auntie's second wedding. Like, it's really fucking small. But anyway, if you're going to get the blazer for the costume, you should really consider getting it some sizes smaller than what you usually get. My recommendation is that you measure the length of your arm and try and find out at what size it would make the sleeve of the blazer look the most like the one used in the movie. Then, you try and find a smaller blazer that has a similar sleeve measurement. And that's about it. As of today, there is no info pertinent to the status of the screen-used blazer, so its existence and location as of now is unknown. The masks that Leatherface uses in the movie, as his name implies, are Leatherfaces, taken from his past victims and tanned to be wearable. The purpose they served in the movie, aside from being dope as fuck, was to signify that Leatherface was using a specific personality at the time. The way Gunnar Hansen and Toby Hooper described it in an interview was that Leatherface himself didn't have a personality of his own, so he used those masks to determine what character he felt like playing at the time. Toby Hooper in particular said in an interview, "It really came from Greek tragedy as a foundation, but it was just something I felt the character would do. It isn't that he's hiding anything." Referring to how, in Greek theater, actors used to wear large expressive masks to make it easier for the audience to differentiate the characters. And most interesting of all, the masks allowed one actor to play multiple characters, just like Leatherface and his personalities. The person responsible for creating these masks for the film was Robert A. Burns, aka Bob Burns, the art director for the film. Along with making most of the iconic human remains decor for the film, he was also tasked with making the masks Leatherface would use during the movie. And since the name of the character is Leatherface, and not raw bloody skin that is really impractical to use as a mask and prone to rotting face, Bob Burns decided it would be best to make a mask that looked like dry skin that had been cared and treated like actual leather. So, he started his search to try and find a method to create a material that would look just like dry skin and be still really practical to use during filming. The results of his research created the formula we now refer to as the Burns method. Named after its inventor, the Burns method consists of a mixture between liquid latex and yellow fiberglass insulation. Burns described the method as such in his now defunct website called robertaburns.com, saying it was a latex and fiberglass insulation mix. Additionally, in the horror documentary Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Shocking Truth, Burns went more into depth about the method, saying the following.
I worked a long time doing experimentations of material to try to make something that might look like human skin that was peeled off and dried. And like the Leatherface faces, we took molds of people's faces, and I came up with this formula, if you will, of using liquid latex and some fiberglass insulation material that I could peel off in very, very thin sheets and stick in there, and so it layered up, and so it was fibrous looking, and it was translucent, and it would naturally turn this kind of brownish, yellowish color. It would maintain a bit of the facial form. People we see and killed in the movies, they've been hit on the head with a sledgehammer. So each of them is going to have a hole, or has been abraded, bashed through right there. And so then, okay, what would they patch that up with? So we wired it up with thin wire, and it was all this very crude stuff, and sewed on things to make it look like they had peeled somebody's face that they had killed. And then, had the face, they had the mouth kind of wired open with wire inside it, and wired everything. You could see what they did.
With all of this info given directly from Robert himself, you can vaguely paint a picture of how the formula works. He would take fiberglass insulation in thin layers, and he would stipple it up with liquid latex until it was saturated in it, so that the fiberglass would stick to the mold. Talking about the molds, Robert would never really talk about the types of molds he would use to create the masks, and none of them were ever found. Well, that's because the molds he used were made by a friend of Marilyn Burns, a plastic surgeon by the name of Dr. W. E. Barnes. He was the person responsible for making the latex appliances that John Dugan would use during his role as the grandpa. But aside from that, he was also responsible for making the molds that Robert would use to make the masks for the film. In a post from an old website called TexasChainsawMassacre.net, there is a collection of emails fans sent to the site from their conversations with Dr. Barnes. And in one of them, he describes how he would have little to no sleep during the filming of the film because he would often have to make facial molds of people so that they could be used to make the masks. And he would also say that the molds were made using dental alginate and were secured with plaster straps. In another documentary about the film called Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1974, Flesh Wounds Documentary, there was a section dedicated to interviewing Dr. Barnes, and in it he says the following.
I made a lot of masks using dental alginate, and it's set up so rapidly that sometimes in order to get enough to cover a face, I'd have to have 2 or 3 people mixing up so we could get it on there before it's set up. And then I would cover it with strips of plaster, and I use plaster like you'd use for a cast. Well, the stuff deteriorated pretty rapidly, so you had to do something with it. And Bob Burns made all the masks. The ones that we were going to use for that purpose, I gave to him, and then he did whatever he did for the mask. I actually had somebody make one of my face. I figured if I was going to put everybody through this, I would know what it felt like, because you had to have big pieces of straws in your nose with cotton packed around them and all that. So I guess one of the masks was probably made from my face.
With this clip, Dr. Barnes basically confirms that he made the molds and sent them to Robert Burns so that he could, quote-unquote, do his thing. And again, he reiterates that the molds were made from alginate. This detail is important to note because dental alginate is a disposable molding material. The usable lifespan of dental alginate after it is set is approximately 24 hours. After this time frame, it starts to warp and deteriorate, and that time only decreases depending on how high the temperatures are. So with how hot Texas was during the filming, you can bet your ass that none of these molds used by Bob Burns have survived. And you can also be sure that he probably didn't have much time to mess around when casting these masks with the formula. By the way, here's a funny bit of trivia about Dr. Barnes. He mentions that he had one of these molds taken off his face so that Bob Burns could use it to make one of the masks used in the movie. With the info I found, the chances of his face being used in one of the 3 masks are really low. But the prototype latex mask made by Bob Burns that is being stored at the Harry Renson Center collection bears a striking resemblance to Dr. Barnes. I have no proof to back this claim, but I personally believe that this face mask made by Bob Burns is the one from Dr. Barnes' face mold. One last thing I would like to mention about all the masks, including the prototype, is that they are very thin. They are almost as thin as paper. And this is most likely a consequence of Robert Burns not having enough time to work with the alginate molds. So, he made the fiberglass and latex casts really fast with a low amount of layers, if any. And as a result, all the masks are quite thin. And because of this, they all share some interesting characteristics. One of them being that it allowed Bob Burns to fold the edges of the eyelids and the lips inwards and glue them down, probably with more liquid latex. This was done to hide the rough edges of the cuts of the eyelids and also to make the mouths of the masks stay open more easily. As another consequence of them being so thin, they were very fragile and would easily rip and distort under any pressure. There might be more side effects of this method that I could mention, but for now, this is all I could identify. After finding all this info in my research, I had a good starting point to experiment and try to replicate the Burns method. It took some trial and error, and I'm still not a master at the formula. But I pretty much know the cause of my mistakes, and I'll be sure to tell you how to avoid them. But for now, I got a result that I feel is good enough that I can show you. And I even forced Minion to film and photograph himself performing the formula so that you can follow along. So, enjoy! The materials you're gonna need for this tutorial are as follows. Yellow fiberglass insulation. No Brasil, esse material se chama lã de vidro, caso não saibam. This is what was used in the film, and if you're trying to go for 100% accuracy, this is the way to go. But the problem with this shit is it can be a real pain in the ass to work it with. This stuff is made with really small particles of glass inside it. So when you pick it apart or just move it even, it releases all these fucking small shits all over the air. And if it gets in contact with your body, it can cause some irritation on your airways, your lungs, your eyes. Your skin is gonna be itching like shit. And in long periods of exposure, I'm pretty sure it can cause like some respiratory issues, health issues, you know? And this shit is gonna spread all over your room. So if you insist on working with this thing, like fiberglass, please work in a well-ventilated workroom or a open area. And make sure you wear glasses and a mask, or like a fucking professional respirator mask. And use the appropriate clothes, like working clothes, you know, those like hazmat suits. Yeah, use those shits, or use some clothes you don't mind getting dirty. And have fun. But if you don't want to go through all that hassle, and you don't mind not using the same material, there is another alternative. Crystal Lake Creations posted on Facebook once that a good substitute for fiberglass is to use hair fibers such as mohair and crepe hair with the same color as the fiberglass, like a dirty blonde or a brighter blonde or something. Just, yeah, try to match the color. According to him, if you do it right, it gives the same effect and is 100% safe. So yeah, look into that if you're not going to use fiberglass. The next material on the list is liquid latex. I recommend you use the thin and runny stuff, you know, the kind like for makeup and shit, because when you have to use a brush, the more thin latex will allow you to cover all the areas of the mold in thin layers, and it's gonna like be more cost efficient, I think. Some bullshit like that. Eu vou deixar link na descrição para o látex que eu usei nesses testes. Ele é ótimo para essa porra. You will also need disposable brushes. This shit, latex and fiberglass, is gonna destroy any brush you use. So if you're planning on using this tutorial, I recommend you buy a cheap set of brushes. You won't miss if they become unusable. But don't be stupid. Don't just use a brush for one layer and throw it away. Once you finish a layer, go directly to a sink and clean that brush as best as possible, rubbing it against your palm to remove as much of the latex that is loaded on it. Like, if you can reuse something and save money, do it. Don't be a dumbass. Another thing you're gonna need is talcum powder, so that you can remove the latex spool from the mold without it sticking to itself. The last thing you will need is a mold. In the film they used a dental alginate mold, but I'll warn you, alginate is the biggest pain in the ass. I tried multiple times to do face molds using dental alginate on people's faces, but that shit is the most unforgiving material out there. It sets so fast that there's like absolutely no room for error. In one of my attempts, I used cold water to slow down the curing time, and as soon as I started mixing, in 10 seconds the alginate was like fully set. I just hate it, man. Not only that, the amount of preparation and materials you'll need to make a face cast of a person is so stressful and like costly. I just really don't recommend you do this shit. What I do recommend you use is silicone rubber because it is a really good substitute for alginate. It's really similar, but better. It's more resistant, it lasts longer, retains more details. After 100 pulls, it still has the same details. But the only thing is that it takes more time to cure, unlike alginate. So trying to use it to make a mold out of a living person's face is gonna be way more stressful of a process. Not only for you, but for the subject. So honestly, I just recommend you make a mold out of a sculpt of someone's face so that you don't have to worry about accidentally killing someone. And that's basically what I did. I made a silicone and plaster matrix mold out of a sculpt I made. So, yeah. A borracha de silicone que eu usei foi da Redelize. Funcionou de boa ali, deu tudo certo. Eu usei a fórmula que eles dão ali e medi tudo direitinho e funcionou de boa. Tu não vai ter problema com essa borracha. A única coisa que eu recomendo tu fazer antes de comprar uma das borrachas deles é pesquisar o sistema de firmeza deles, porque tipo é completamente baseado na cor da borracha de silicone. Então, cada cor diferente é uma firmeza específica, tá ligado? Então, é bom tu dar uma pesquisada pra ver o que fica melhor para o que você vai fazer. I recommend you get more silicone than you think you'll need. This way you won't end up with a thin and floppy mold. With the extra silicone, you can beef it up and make it stronger. This way you won't rip it apart when handling it. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. How to the fuck are you gonna cast latex on a silicone mold? That's a fair question, but for those who don't know, latex, to dry completely, needs to lose its humidity. And the reason plaster molds are recommended for latex is because they are porous and they absorb the humidity from the latex directly. But the thing is, latex can also dry out completely with contact with the air. So if you brush on thin layers of latex on a silicone mold, it will still dry completely. Then you can just brush on the next layer and the next one on top of it, and so on and so forth until it's finished. And yeah, the thing is, this is most likely what Robert did for his formula, since he was working with alginate molds, which are also non-porous, like silicone. I'm gonna leave a good tutorial on the description of the video on how to make a silicone and plaster matrix mold. So yeah, make your own mold and then come back here when you're ready to proceed, or just fucking watch it anyways. Okay, now if you have all the materials needed, or if you just want to fucking learn the damn method, we are ready to start. So first off, you're going to get your brush and you're going to load it with liquid latex. Then you're going to start covering the whole mold in latex to make the first layer. You should do this quickly so that you can cover the whole mold before the latex starts to cure and turn transparent. This way you won't start questioning yourself if you forgot to brush a specific part. Because if you try to add more latex out of fear on an area that is already cured, you most likely will fuck up and peel the layer by sticking it to your brush. So be quick and confident. It's important to get the first layer correct and just right, because This is the part of the mask that everyone will see. It's the front part. So if you fuck it up, it's gonna look shitty no matter what you do after. So after you apply the first layer, you're going to know it's fully cured because it's gonna turn completely transparent and the mold is gonna seem a bit shiny. Once the first layer is fully cured, I recommend you repeat what you did and make a second layer of latex on top of it so that the outer layer of the mask becomes more resistant. Doing this will help prevent fuck-ups on the next step. So yeah, you should probably do it. After the outer layer of latex gets done setting up, you're ready to make the fiberglass layer. To do this, you will need to peel some really thin layers off the fiber, thin enough to almost see through it. Also, don't try and use really long fibers. Be sure to break them down into small workable pieces, and accordingly, only work on small areas. I recommend doing this because you'll be sticking these pieces of fiber on a three-dimensional mold. So yeah, trying to make a large flat piece of fiber fit a unconventionally shaped mold is bound to cause you some headaches. Anyway, once you got the pieces of fiber you will need, brush a thin layer of latex on the area of the mold you're going to work on, and then just add the fiber. Once it is stuck to the latex below, you will load a generous amount of latex to your brush and you will proceed to stipple the latex on top of the fiber, saturating it completely and compacting it into a thin layer. Make sure you add a good amount of latex and spread it evenly to every area you are working on. And be sure to compact the fiber as tightly as possible everywhere around so that the fiberglass layer bonds extremely well to the latex layer below. This will prevent the layers from laminating in the future. Do this until the entire mold is covered. And once the entire mold is covered in the fiber, it's gonna be hard to know if any areas are missing fiber because of the uncured latex. So I recommend you let it all dry for a whole day until the latex turns from white to clear. Once this layer is clear and fully set, seeing the areas that could use more fiber will become much easier. So once you identify these areas, patch them with more fiber and let it all set correctly. Once the fiberglass layer is fully set and filled to your liking, you will just need to seal off the fiberglass layer on the inside of the mask by brushing 2 more layers of liquid latex. I recommend doing this because I doubt you would want to have fiberglass come in contact with your skin. It sure won't be a fun experience, trust me. Anyway, just do this like you did with the outer layer. Load your brush with liquid latex and quickly cover the whole mold. Then, let it set, and cover it again with a second layer just to be sure. Then, once this final layer is done setting, you are ready to peel and remove the latex spool from the mold. To do so, you just need to first brush some talcum powder all over the inside of the final layer of latex so that it doesn't stick to itself when you're removing it from the mold. Then, you will carefully peel the latex from the mold and brush the talcum powder on the now visible outer layer as you go. Do this until the entire thing is removed from the mold. After that, give it a quick wash on a sink to remove the excess powder. Then, once you dry it off, you should have yourself a complete latex cast of a face made using the Bob Burns method. Oh, and by the way, this method works fine with big molds too. Here's a test face cast I did using the formula. It has some flaws, but I pretty much know what happened. It's because I used thick pieces of fiber, so they required more latex to become fully saturated. And obviously I didn't use enough, so they ended up laminating from the outer layer of latex. So just use thin pieces and saturate them well, as I recommended before, and you will be fine. Now, I am not claiming this is 100% how Robert Burns did his formula, but I am pretty sure it is really similar, since the results of my recreation of the formula are incredibly close to what is seen in the movie. A fibrous brownish yellow, almost translucent, thin latex and fiberglass insulation mix. So feel free to use this tutorial to make your own masks. But also, don't feel obligated to follow it to a T. At its most basic, my rendition of the formula is just sandwiching a thin piece of fiberglass insulation between two layers of liquid latex. So do not restrict yourself. Do less layers. Do more layers. Use an uneven number of them. Use a different fiber. Use a fiber with different colors. Pink, blue, red. The sky's the limit once you learn the basics. But most of all, be sure to have fun. The last thing I would like to mention on the topic of how the masks were made is about the process of tanning the latex. The first time I heard of this process was from Colby Jones, a prominent mask maker in the TCM community. And in an interview, he said that he does tan the masks he makes, and it apparently changes the color of the latex. He described the process as letting the latex poles sunbathe or get blasted by a heat lamp for a numerous amount of hours until they change colors. Anyway, I later found info that comes directly from Robert A. Burns. In an amateur video recording made by Robert himself, called Still Chainsaw After All These Years, 2004, he attended the Cinema Wasteland celebration of the 30th anniversary of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which reunited the cast and crew of the film to talk at a panel to answer questions from fans. And at about 10 minutes and 40 seconds in, Gunnar Hansen asks Bob Burns the following question.
I'd always heard that you actually, once you had made the cast, that you had the casting, that you aged it in a microwave. Is that true?
Ate it? No.
Aged.
No,
Yeah.
no, they turn that color, with exposure to the sun.
Well, this is a special.
As you heard, Robert said that the masks had turned that color from exposure to the sun. But he doesn't say exactly what color it changed to. So I asked Grim Grinner Studios, a TCM mask maker on Instagram, what he knew about the subject. And he told me that with exposure to UV rays and heat, latex naturally changes color, and that it goes from a foggy yellow to a dark brown. This info was really helpful as it helped me conclude that this latex tanning process, it was basically just a practice of accelerating the natural oxidation of latex. Yellow oxidation on latex is caused by exposure to oxygen combined with UV rays and heat. This chemical reaction occurs when the polymer bonds on latex react with oxygen in the air. And the reaction only exacerbates in the presence of UV rays and heat, causing the latex to go from clear to yellow to brown. It is also important to note that sweat can also contribute to speeding the chemical reaction. This happens due to the acids and oils present in sweat. I am saying this because it is a well-documented fact that during filming, Texas heat was unforgiving, and Gunnar Hansen was not having a fun time. He was sweating like a pig in that thick costume, and he was smelling even worse. So it is fair to say that he probably contributed to the oxidation process. With all that info, I started experimenting to see if I could successfully tin latex. And I am going to save your time. It didn't work. I have yet to get any significant results after 4 weeks. I am not sure what could be the problem, as this is not a well-documented process. Maybe it could be that the type of latex I used is resistant to oxidation. Or maybe the amount of heat and UV rays I used was insufficient. Or possibly it just takes that much amount of time to even get close to getting any results. Anywho, I don't think this process is worth your trouble, as this tinning is almost unnoticeable in the actual film. But if you want to try and execute this process on your own masks, this is the best setup I could come up with to speed this process. First, get a 500 to 1000 watts UV lamp so that you won't have to worry about using the sun. Then, build a icing reflection box to amplify the area of effect of the UV lamp. Then, spray the mask with a mixture of water, salt, lemon juice, and glycerin all over it. This mixture will act as a substitute for sweat and its acids. Then, wrap it in plastic wrap and let it bask in the UV lamp, closed in the icing reflection box. This is almost the same setup used for deoxidizing shoe soles. But instead of using a bleaching agent, you're going to use the substitute sweat as an oxidizing agent. I am not 100% sure this will work, as I have never used this setup, so replicate it at your own will. But if the info I have is correct, then this theoretically should work. If you do build this setup and try and tin some masks, please let me know the results. It would greatly help my research. Good luck. The killing mask was the first one to be used by Leatherface during the film. This mask is an intriguing one to me, since it is used during all of the kills in the movie. But it is also used when Leatherface shows most of his humanity in the story. Aside from that, just the mask itself tells us an interesting story. The wired shut hole in its forehead most likely being the killing blow from a hammer, the square pieces of leather substituting the ears that can also act as a makeshift muffler for the loud noises of the chainsaw, and the high amount of creasing and distortion in the mask, showing us that this is most likely Leatherface's most used mask. There are a lot of interesting storytelling details in this mask, but now I will focus on the details of how this mask was made. In Gunnar's book, The Chainsaw Confidential, he states that the killing mask was made using the face mold of the film's executive producer, J. Bill Parsley. And he even quotes Marilyn Burns, the actress who played Sally in the film, of saying, quote, "It did look like Bill Parsley, and that was so funny. Both Dr. Barnes and Bill Parsley were so proud of doing that cast of his face. They were really going to screw up the producer's mask so that it really looked bad as Leatherface." End quote. This info alone would be okay, but there is more info on the subject that could be seen as contradicting. Robert Burns, as you know, made all of the masks, and he has claimed both on his old website and in old interviews that the face cast of the executive producer, J. Parsley, was used for the face lamp on the dinner scene. So, some of you might be thinking, well, the man himself said that it was used for something different. So the killing mask must have been made using someone else with a similar face. But that would be a very narrow view, because Robert never denied also using it to make the killing mask. Furthermore, I spent some time comparing the killing mask and the face lamp, and surprisingly, they both match really well in details. They even have the same mold defect on the left side of the nose. So I am 90% sure they are a match. Now, I am not saying that the face lamp and the killing mask use the very same latex cast. That would not be possible due to time and damage discrepancies. But what I am proposing is that both of them came from this very same alginate mold made by Dr. Barnes. Casting latex on dental alginate doesn't damage the mold. So it's very possible that Robert was efficient enough to make the first face cast for the killing mask, and had enough time to make another cast for the face lamp, since it didn't need to be as detailed as the mask. Now that we have established that the killing mask and the face lamp were both made using the very same mold, this pretty much confirms the claim that it was made using J. Parsley's face, and that info alone would be very helpful, if not for the fact that there is no photos available of J. Parsley on any movie cast websites with the film. I searched for a long time using conventional methods and didn't get any results. So I made a conscious decision to lock the fuck in and search far and wide for more info on J. Parsley. And it didn't take long for me to find his full name and profession on a book about the film called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre Companion. In this book, there is a section that states that J. Parsley's name is actually Bill J. Parsley, and that he was an official vice president for the Texas Tech University. So, I used this newfound info to expand my search, and I found myself on the Legislative Reference Library of Texas website, on the profile of a Bill J. Parsley, who lived in the same time period as the film. In the biographical section of the profile, there is a file called Resolutions Memorial. In it, it states that in 1965, this man was also appointed as the vice president of Texas Tech University. This was the last piece of info I needed to fully confirm this is the same Bill J. Parsley that produced the film. What was also present in his profile were 2 photos of the man himself. And I gotta say, I don't even feel like comparing the photos to the killing mask or the lamp, because his face is so unique. There's no mistaking it. The nose, the eyes, the head shape, the wrinkles on the cheeks, it all screams killing mask. Now that we know the face that was used to make the killing mask, we can move on to the alterations made to the latex cast to turn it into the iconic mask we all love. The most notable alteration is the wide open mouth. In an old recording uploaded to YouTube called Marilyn Burns, Paul Partain, Alan Dazinger, and Bob Burns Discuss Chainsaw with David Gregory, Robert gives his insightful quote about the reason for the alteration. Here's the clip.
What about these
Now
teeth?
that is really Leatherface.
Yeah, well, the
They're-
teeth was an appliance that's why they wanted the mouth on this mask very big so they would see these teeth that they paid good money for. And so, once again, going by what they would do, put a big piece of coat hanger wire in there to make the mouth real big and wired it in. And
he also has a presence that, to me, the other Leatherfaces.
As stated in the clip, he used a coat hanger wire to keep the mouth wide open, making it easier for the audience to see that costly denture appliance. After matching measurements, I believe the wire used was 2 millimeters thick, which is also the standard for coat hangers. I made a 1-to-1 scale template for the shape of the wire used on the mouth. If the template doesn't fit the sculpt you've made, don't be afraid to scale it down a bit. As for how the wires were glued, it was really DIY. Analyzing photos of the Killing Mask nowadays, the mouth wires have come apart, and it's possible to see a petrified piece of black thread at one end of the upper wire. And that piece of thread seems a bit gray, which makes me believe that Robert tied a piece of thread around the ends of both the wires, binding them. Then he used super glue to solidify the thread and lock both the wires together. I think this is plausible because using super glue on thread, especially black thread, can turn it gray. But I'm just speculating. This is just what worked for me. Now, with the mouth wires glued together, it's time to attach them to the mouth of the latex face cast. The way Robert went about doing this is really clever. Remember how on all of the masks, the lips are folded and glued inwards? So, for the upper lip, Robert just folded and glued the upper lip with the wire inside it. This way, he didn't need to use stitches to hold it. And for the lower lip, it's kinda hard to explain, so I'm just gonna use a drawing. Well, he did that right there. Then he used some thread to sew the wire and the lower lip and lock them together. Of course, the mouth wire is too wide to fit the mouth of the latex cast if you only cut the mouth open. So what Robert did was cut the mouth Joker style, making cuts that go way past the corners of the mouth. Then the cuts curve upwards. By the way, the right cut goes way further out than the left one. That should be it for the mouth. Now to the eyes. The way Robert did it, he cut them open and did 2 little cuts to every corner of the lids. This way he could fully open them. To keep the upper lids open, what appears to be some thin cotton string was used to sew them to the lower part of the brows. After some deep analysis, I believe the way Robert sewed the cotton string to keep the upper lids open was that he started by tying a knot on the outer side of the lids. Then he sewed it along until reaching the inner side of the lids. After that, you would just need to pull the string to tighten the stitching, and finish by tying a final knot near the last stitch hole so that it doesn't get loose. Now, the lower lids don't seem to be altered to stay open in any way. Aside from possibly having the rough edges flipped and glued to the inside, they are unaltered. But, because of the little cuts to the corners, when the mask gets stretched vertically from being worn, they flare out and stay open. Now, the last notable detail about the eyes are the eyelashes. They were probably glued with liquid latex, and they most likely were glued before the eyes were sewn open, since you can see the thread go over the eyelashes on the left eye. The upper lashes are just normal, unaltered fake lashes, but the bottom ones are trimmed short. But all of them are glued to the outer side of the eyelids. That should be everything covered for the eyes. Now to the last notable alteration made to the latex face cast. The forehead wires. They don't really serve a utility purpose. It is mostly there for visual storytelling, to imply the cause of death of a previous victim. But anyway, after analyzing new high-definition photos of the present-day killing mask, I was able to make a very plausible assessment of how Robert did it. From the photos, you can tell that every line of wire is composed of two thin wires mashed together. They don't seem to be glued to each other, since you can see that there is loose space between them. Another thing I should mention is that in my interpretation, two of these doubled up wires were used to sew the hole in the forehead. It's just the alternative that makes the most sense to me. Now, here is my interpretation of how the wires were sewn through the forehead hole. This image is pretty self-explanatory, with each doubled up wire being represented by a single line of color. The only real explanation I should give is that at the bottom right of this interpretation, both the green and blue wires cut off and end in red points. This is simple. The red points mark where the wire broke apart due to age and stress. The green wires broke completely off, and only one of the wires in the blue line broke, leaving one still intact in the original path. Now, as for the hole in the forehead itself, it's hard to know the original shape it had, since the only photos we have of reference are during the film, when it was highly compressed and distorted from the newly done sewing job, and photos from the mask in present day, when the hole in the forehead is now highly distorted from sagging and aging. But, using both references, we can make a good estimation of a in-between. And so, I made a template for my estimation of the original shape of the hole when Robert first cut it in the forehead. I also added the placements of the holes the wires go through, and even color-coded them accordingly to each double wire. By the way, as for my guess as to which wire was placed first, I think it might have been the green double wire, since it was this wire that was under the most stress, having broken off completely, and the blue one was added later to close the right side and reinforce the left side with its remaining length. And with that, that is all the alterations made to the latex face cast. Now to the construction of the mask. Aside from the latex face cast, the rest of the mask is composed of flat pieces of latex made with the Burns method. Two small jagged rectangles for the ears, the left ear being bigger than the right one, a big rectangle piece for the back of the neck, and a rectangle piece for the forehead with a rounded edge to accommodate the curvature of the latex face cast. To sew these pieces together, Robert used what looks like black waxed leather thread. But, just like the forehead wires, it is two pieces of this thread mashed together. So yeah, with this double thread, Robert baseball stitched the rounded edge forehead piece to the latex face cast. A notable detail is that both lengths of the forehead piece end at the height of the eyes. And right where the forehead piece ends, the ears begin, being baseball stitched to the face with the same double black waxed leather thread. Then, what appears to be some big staples are used to attach the ears to the forehead piece. Now, with the ears and forehead attached to the face, the next step is to attach the forehead and neck piece to the hair of the mask, which was a black, short-haired wig with 2C curls. This wig most likely was made from natural hair, since the present-day killing mask is starting to show some gray and reddish brown hairs, which are a clear sign of natural hair pigment loss due to the elements, with the most likely element being the sun, since exposure to UV rays can cause hair bleaching over time. Anyway, to attach the face and neck piece to the wig, what was most likely done was that they were sewn together, since it would be really messy to glue them on. And the wig cap on the inside would make it easier just to use some thread to sew the pieces. And, additionally, if Robert really did sew them all together, he most likely used the same black waxed leather thread, since it's stress resistant and was already available. And so, now the face and neck pieces are attached to the wig, leaving only one thing left to be done to complete the mask. And that is attaching the eyelets to the neck. You can tell they are eyelets and not grommets because in this photo, you can see that there is no backing piece on that thing. And it splits like a flower in the back, making it an eyelet. Infelizmente, o Brasil não produz eyelet. Por isso, grommets, ou ilhós, como são melhor conhecidos, são a única opção. There are 8 total eyelets on the mask, 4 on the neck piece, and 4 on the neck area of the face cast. 2 for each edge of the neck. The eyelets on the killing mask are a silver color, being the standard type. And they most likely are the type with a 5mm hole. Once the eyelets are in place, you just need the cord to tie the mask to your face. The cord used was a flat leather cord, 2 for each side, in a dark brown color. Just like the eyelets, it was most likely 5mm wide. I'm not sure what was the total length of the cord, but it was enough to lace all the way to the bottom row of the eyelets, tie a knot, and hang all the way to the shoulders. The left cord seems to be longer than the right one. And that should be all for how the killing mask was made. The current owner of the screen-used killing mask is called David Munoz. He goes by TCM74 The Collection on Instagram, and in his profile he shares photos of his collection of memorabilia and screen-used props from the film, including the killing mask. Recently, David has brought out the killing mask to be displayed at the 2024 edition of the Texas Frightmare Weekend, a horror-centric convention based in Texas for all kinds of horror fans. So there are other photos of the mask available on the internet, aside from his profile. You just need to search around and try and ask for them. So yeah, good luck. The old lady mask is the second mask to be used in the film. This mask is my favorite one. It's so disturbing in its visuals and implications, with a gaping hole right at the top of its head, most likely being a fatal blow from Leatherface's hammer, and the ripped mouth possibly being the result of hanging from the meat hook by the neck. But, at the same time, it perfectly plays into the dark humor aspect that Tobe Hooper and Kim Henkel were implementing in the script, because this creepy and dark mask is used during the most goofy and comical parts of the film. The scene where all of the Slaughter brothers are reunited and their dysfunctional family dynamics are on full display, you see Leatherface, this huge wall of a person trying to make himself small and doing his best impression of a old woman while running away from the cook. It just cracks me up, I swear, every time. But now, let's go over how this mask was made. About 2 years ago, when I first started researching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I was really lost as to where I could find meaningful information. So I started searching every website, Instagram profile, YouTube video, movie trivia sites, Facebook groups, vintage blog posts, and much, much more. In this search, I found a profile on Facebook by the name of Leatherface Masks Collectors, who had a great amount of photos and posts about the film. So I naturally started going through all of them to see what I could find. But it didn't take long for something to catch my interest, because in the middle of that collection of photos, there was one in particular that really intrigued me. It was a really crudely edited photo of the old lady mask with the John Dugan life cast superimposed on top of it to compare both of their similarities, with a description that read, quote, "Making the Old Lady Mask 1974, unquote. And even in the description, the owner of the profile responds to a comment by saying, quote, "I read that Bob Burns used as a model the face of John Dugan to create the Old Lady Mask," unquote. As of today, I have yet to find any interview, writing, or post claiming this info. But anyway, after finding this post, I tried comparing the life cast and the mask for myself to see what I could find. But the results were inconclusive due to the fact that at the time, the photos of the life cast were really low quality. But in October of 2023, it was announced by Chase Anderson from the official TCM Museum on Instagram and Facebook that he had acquired the original materials made by Dr. Barnes for the movie, including the original John Dugan life cast. And he also announced that he was going to sell a limited run of replicas capped at 20 copies. By the way, I was able to get one, so I will have lots of reference photos for all of you. But anyway, with this post, we got a new set of high-definition photos of the life cast. And with them, I tried once more to find similarities between the old lady mask and John Dugan's face. And believe it or not, I found a good amount of them, which I'll be showing on screen.
4.
With these matched details, I am 90% sure that John Dugan was indeed the person used to make the mask. I can't be 100% sure because there are some small differences between the face cast and the mask. Some imperfections and bumps that are present on the mask, but absent on the life cast. But I do have a good explanation for why that is. The original life cast did have those imperfections, but they were shaved down along with the eyebrows, eyelashes, and the hair. I believe Dr. Barnes did this so that he could sculpt the grandpa appliances and make them fit as tight as possible on John Dugan's face. And this claim of mine is substantiated by proof because, as you can see in this old photo of the life cast, it still had the eyebrows, the hair, the bumps, the imperfections, and the rough edges. But even with all of this, it is of my belief that they did not directly use the life cast to make the old lady mask. Because why would they waste their time making another mold using a life cast when Robert could have just used the original alginate mold made using John Dugan's face that has all the same details? I mean, it makes sense. It would cut down on costs, and it could have been done since Robert was used to having little time to work on the molds by now. The only argument against this is that the mold was clearly destroyed when making the life cast. But this is also simple to counter because Robert could have just made the latex pull before the life cast. And the latex doesn't even damage the alginate, so the mold would have been just fine afterwards and ready to be used to make the life cast. Look, I even made an infographic to fully explain this proposed timeline of mine. Now that we have an understanding of who was the most likely candidate for the face used to make the old lady mask, it's time to talk about the alterations made to the latex face cast to make it look the way it did in the film. And to start, we will go over the alterations made to the mouth. For the mouth, Robert did his usual thing of cutting the mouth open, then folding and gluing the lips to the inside of the mask. But then, on the right corner of the mouth, he made a little cut that goes beyond the end of the mouth. Then he extended the cut downwards. And for the left corner of the mouth, he extended the cut horizontally by a good amount. Then he started cutting in a zigzag pattern downwards, until reaching the height of the chin. At this point, it turns into a vertical cut that stops at about 1/3 of the way down the neck. After making all of the cuts to the mouth, Robert loosely baseball stitches the now open left side of the mouth with that same iconic double black waxed leather thread. As for how exactly he sewed it, I have no clue. That shit is a mess, and there ain't no good reference pictures of it available. Lastly, it's possible that Robert might have brushed the lips a darker color. And that's it. With the mouth fully modified, now we move to the eyes. For the eyes, Robert cut both of them right up to the edges of each eyelid. Then, for the right eye, he made vertical cuts going up from the edges of the eye and stopped right under the eyebrow. After making the eye cuts, the eyelashes were glued to each eyelid, and the bottom lashes were trimmed. With that done, the eyelids just needed to be held open, so they were sewn in place. For the right eye, I think that since it was already so workable from the vertical cuts, all it needed was a couple stitches, one in its center and another to the right to keep it open. There might be one to the left, but those two are the only stitches that I could see. Now, for the left eye, it was stretched and stitched open in 3 different spots that I can see. But for both eyes, I believe that black wax leather thread was used. And with that, the eyes are done. With the eyes and mouth fully modified, now the latex face cast is ready. The next step is constructing the mask. For this mask as well, the other parts you will need are basically flat pieces of latex made using the Burns method. One large rectangle piece for the back of the neck, and a piece of unknown shape, most likely a rectangle as well, to serve as a forehead extension that will have a large hole at the top of the mask's head. To attach this forehead extension, I don't know exactly what Robert might have done, since the piece is fully hidden under the hair. He could have glued them with liquid latex, but I personally think it was stitched as well, since it's the more durable solution. And if that's the case, he most likely used that fucking iconic double black wax leather thread he got. Now, with the forehead extension attached, the next step is stitching the face and the back of the neck to the hair of the mask, which was a dirty blonde medium length wig with 2C curls. In the film, you can see that the wig has two hair buns in the back, a large one to the left side and a small one to the right, and they both seem to be covered by a hairnet. These hair buns were most likely done by Robert, because they are kinda crudely done. So, okay, attaching the neck piece to the hair is pretty straightforward, but as for the face, I feel I should mention that it was most likely attached to the wig by the actual latex face cast part. This way, the extension piece would stay hidden. After that, just glue or stitch the extension to the wig so that it doesn't move. Then, all that is left to do is make the hole in the top of the head. To make the hole in the wig, I think Robert might have cut a circle out of the hair. And then, for the latex below, he just did some jagged cuts. I made a template for the hole in the latex for those interested. So yeah. After making those cuts, the mask is almost done. All it needs are the eyelets. Like the other masks, this one also has 8 eyelets, 2 for every corner of the neck area. The eyelets on the old lady mask are a gunmetal color, and the same size as the others, with a 5mm hole. After placing the eyelets on the neck, you just need to lace up the mask with some burlap twine, and the old lady mask is all done. The current owner of the screen-used old lady mask is unknown. It appears that he is a private collector from outside the US. There is a story floating around that he is from Germany and that he tried to get the mask restored, quote unquote. And apparently he posted photos of the mask after the restoration job, which supposedly were not flattering. There is absolutely no proof, by the way, that this is real, as I was not able to find any photo of the mask beyond the one from the heritage auction. So, yeah, I don't know. There is no concrete clue as to what the fuck happened to it. So don't get your hopes up. I don't think we'll ever see this mask again, so all we have is the photo they used for the auction. So, yeah, kinda sad. It was my favorite mask, but what can you do? The Pretty Woman mask is the last to be used in a movie, and this mask personally is the one I find the scariest, as it displays just how crazy Leatherface really is. The visual of a huge chainsaw-wielding man running towards you with a suit that he probably stole from a buried corpse, and the mutilated face of a woman with the most manic makeup job ever, because that's his idea of dressing up nice for the family dinner. It's just out of this world. It truly is something only a person with absolutely no sense of reality would do. And because of this, no normal person will ever know his next move. And that uncertainty is truly a scary thing. But that aside, let's talk about how this great mask was made. Some time ago, I was watching a IG live stream from a TCM mask maker, and the topic changed to who are the people that had their faces molded to make the masks for the film. And when the mask maker started talking about the Pretty Woman mask and giving his thoughts on the subject, one viewer in the stream made the bold statement that the person whose face was used for the Pretty Woman was the makeup artist for the film, Dorothy Pearl, aka Dottie Pearl. And this claim sure caught my attention, since the viewer who commented seemed pretty confident about it. So I decided I would research the topic to see if I could find any further evidence on the claim. But the search was inconclusive because I was only able to find one post of a mask maker saying that the person whose face was used for the mask was, quote, a woman called Pearl, end quote. Which didn't really help me because it was just reductive. So, with no conclusive results, I decided I would just find out for myself. So I started snooping around the internet, searching for reference pictures of Dorothy Pearl. And I found a good amount of them in good angles. And with these photos, I started trying to match details and proportions between Dorothy's face and the Pretty Woman mask. And honestly, it's really insane to me that more people don't talk about this, because it's a really compelling case. First, let's look at the front-facing comparison. The spacing of the eyes, the shape of the nose, the jaw shape too. It's really similar, isn't it? It could be a match. Now, let's go to the profile comparison, and it's ridiculous. They look identical. Just with this evidence, I'm like 80% sure that Dorothy Pearl is the face of the Pretty Woman mask. Which, let's be honest, it makes sense. She is pretty. And she's also really accomplished. She had a very successful career outside of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Did you know that she won an Emmy in 2003 for a makeup work in a HBO series? Yeah, she's the real deal. So, okay, now that we know the person most likely responsible for giving their likeness to make the Pretty Woman mask, we can go on and talk about how her latex face cast was altered to look the way it did in the movie. So let's start by going over the mouth of the latex cast and the alterations Robert did to it. Like the last two masks, he cut the mouth open, but unlike the other masks, he did not fold and glue the lips to the inside of the mask. I don't know why. Maybe it was to accentuate the feminine details of the mask. But anyway, after that he went as normal and extended the mouth by cutting beyond the corners of the lips. Nothing too crazy, just some small rounded cuts. The only notable thing about the cuts is that the right one splits in two, like the eyes of the killing mask, and the left one is a bit irregular and stays mostly horizontal. And that's pretty much it for the mouth. Now onto the neck. For the neck, Robert did a vertical cut from the middle of the chin all the way down to about the last 1/4 of the neck. I believe the reason the cut was made was because the latex face cast didn't fit Gunnar due to his big chin, let's put it that way. So the cut would give Gunnar more space to wear it and move his jaw in the mask. But, as a side effect of the cut, the neck area of the mask was completely changed. With a combination of Gunnar's face pushing the cut open, and the necklaces pulling the two halves in opposite directions, it made the neck wing out into the more recognizable shape it has, which is the struggle of many mask makers today. This also indirectly made the mouth of the mask stay open, due to the stretching of the cut also pulling the bottom lip downwards. And with that, the neck is done. Now let's move to the eyes, the most striking part of this mask to me. The way Robert did the eyes was as follows. Like the other masks, the eyes were cut open all the way to the edges of each eyelid. Then, for the left eye, the inner edge of the eyelid was extended up with a little vertical cut, and the outer edge was also extended up with a rounded cut. For the right eye, a vertical cut was made right in the middle of the upper eyelid that extends all the way above the eyebrow, which at this point the cut splits in two, turning into a really ugly Y. After making these cuts to the eyes, Robert glued the eyelashes to the outside of each eyelid and trimmed the lower lashes. With the lashes glued, the eyelids were stitched open. For the left eye, I believe that he did at least 4 stitches between the upper eyelid and the lower side of the eyebrow, going from the middle to the near outer edge. For the right eye, the 2 halves of the upper eyelid were folded to the sides and were stitched open. Both halves got at least 2 stitches. Then, for the Y cut, it was baseball stitched shut. All of these stitches were most likely done using the motherfucking double black wax leather thread, as it is clearly seen used to stitch the right eyelid and the Y cut. So, yeah, that's basically it for the eyes. With the eyes done, the latex face cast is fully altered, and we can now move to the construction of the mask. Aside from the latex face, the only other 2 pieces of Burns Formula latex used were a rectangular flat piece for the neck and a rectangular piece to act as a forehead extension. But that is not all. The forehead extension piece has a full ear on the right side, and the space where the left ear would be is conveniently missing, which is really odd because it's not like the ear was sewn into the latex. It is a part of it, which means one of 2 things. Either they found someone who was bald to mold the top of their head in a strip all the way down to their ears, or they made the exact same mold on a bald mannequin head. And both are extremely weird to me because I really can't imagine Robert Burns requesting Dr. Barnes to make this weird mold just to add a detail that is completely covered by hair for most of the screen time where the mask is present. Especially when you consider the tight budget they were operating under. It's just weird to me. But it's something I'll have to look into more, because it probably is what happened for this ear to exist. Anyway, to attach this forehead piece, like the killing mask, Robert baseball stitched the piece to the latex face cast using, you guessed it, our favorite, double black wax leather thread. Something to notice that both ends of the forehead piece end at the height level of the nose. And with that, now we can move on to attaching the latex face and the neck piece to the hair of the mask, which was a black long-haired wig with 2 C curls, which also probably had natural hair. The wig was attached to the forehead extension. Then the back neck piece was also attached. Again, I believe they were sewn together as it is the most resilient solution. And after attaching all of the pieces together, the last thing Robert probably did was attach the eyelets to the neck of the mask. Just like the other masks, 8 eyelets were used on the neck area of the mask, 2 for every corner of the neck. The color of the eyelets was red, and were probably the 5mm hole type. After attaching the eyelets, just lace the mask up with some dark brown flat leather cord, and that's basically all Robert did to make the Pretty Woman mask. Some of you might be thinking right now, this can't be right. The Pretty Woman mask is not complete without its iconic makeup job. And you are right. But like I said before, all the previous steps were done by Robert Burns. The person responsible for adding the makeup was actually the director of the film, Tobe Hooper. It's actually really funny. There's an interview I mentioned before where Robert talks about this exact thing. Here's the clip.
And this is Gunner's third get-up here.
Yeah, this one, he has this beautiful lady mask that they're sitting down to dinner, and so he gets dressed, he's got his suit on, and he's got his formal mask on. They're sitting down to formal dinner. Yeah, they have guests for dinner, so literally.
But it has excess makeup on it here, right? His mask.
He wanted to be pretty.
Yeah, this one was a little point of contention because Toby wanted a beautiful woman mask, and so I worked very hard, took a mask of a very beautiful woman, and made this, and then worked it over to where it was recognizably the mask itself, a very beautiful woman, and then once again Toby likes to go lock himself away and do things, and he came out and he was the one that had ripped it apart and changed it and smeared the paint over it. You couldn't tell that it actually was a beautiful woman. And but at any rate, the idea is that he's gotten all ready decked out for dinner.
As you heard, once Robert finished the mask, Toby took it and made some alterations. What exactly he did, I don't think we'll ever know. But he for sure added the messy makeup you see on the film. What was used on the mask is uncertain. Robert described it as paint, so it could be that. But there is a deleted scene where Leatherface aggressively reapplies the makeup on the mask, and he actually uses white makeup setting powder, which is the reason why there are white stains on the velvet blazer and some areas of the hair. But anyway, my recommendation is to use whatever works for you. And on the latex too, of course. The makeup consists of a white base to act as a white setting powder, a opaque red color to act as the lipstick, some emerald green powder to act as a eyeshadow, and a reddish pink color powder to act as the cheek blush. And that's it. Now the Pretty Woman mask is complete. The current owner of the screen-used Pretty Woman mask is a British bloke that goes by the name of Age House of Horrors on Instagram. And in his profile he shares British photos of his collection, including the Pretty Woman mask, but he doesn't seem to have plans on sharing any more photos on that profile. But he has mentioned on multiple posts that he is supposedly going to open a museum with his collection. Not sure if he still feels like going through with that idea, but who knows. Maybe in the future we will be able to visit and take photos of the mask. Before we go to the next topic, I would like to give a quick warning to those of you who are planning on making and selling replica Leatherface masks. Do not use anyone's work as reference. The people in the TCM community are really protective over their own work, to the point where even just using one of their work's photos for visual aid is enough to get you blacklisted. I made this mistake myself when I made my sculpt for the Killing Mask. And to make it worse, my dumbass forgot to credit the original artist in my excitement to post photos of my first completed clay sculpt. So, needless to say, they didn't take that too kindly. Anyway, It was my bad, so I'm not gonna say anything more about the subject. But yeah, I really recommend you just stick to using photos from the actual movie or the things I've made available in this video. Now, if you stick to using just movie photos and the things I made available, and people still go to your profile and post comments accusing you of copying someone else's work, stay calm and just send them the following sentence. You must have made a mistake. My work was made using only photos from the movie and research that was consensually made available to the public by the researcher. So unless you are enough of a inbred dumbfuck to claim that someone can own the rights to the likeness of a real person because they were the first to sculpt them in clay, my work is not plagiarism. Anyway, to learn how to sculpt, I recommend that you watch some sculpting classes on the Proco 3D YouTube channel. Have fun learning. Lastly, if you don't feel like making your own mask, I can recommend some TCM mask makers that I find talented. The first artist I recommend is called Grim Grinner Studios on Instagram. He is a up-and-coming TCM mask maker, and he currently sells the Killing Mask, both the movie version and the present-day version. His masks are made using the Burns method, but he uses a fiber that is safer for wearing. My personal favorite is the present-day Killing Mask. That mask is spot on. The last artist I will recommend is the Mask Gallery on Instagram. He makes both the Pretty Woman and the Killing Mask. He also uses the Burns method, but additionally, he also uses real face casts to make his masks, which makes them look really realistic. I personally like the Pretty Woman mask. That thing looks straight from the movie, honestly. And that's all the active mask makers I know. So give them a look and see what you can find. The first weapon we see Leatherface wield is his hammer. And funny enough, it's the weapon he used to kill the most people during the film, that being Kirk and Jerry, beating the chainsaw whose only kill was Franklin. That's kinda ironic once you think about it, that a movie called The Texas Chainsaw Massacre only has one chainsaw kill. But back to the current topic, the hammer that Leatherface uses was a vintage cross-pen blacksmithing sledgehammer with ornamental grooves at the points of the pen. Actually, there were two hammers that were used during filming, a real one and a stunt one, because as bad as the conditions were during filming, no mentally sound director would be stupid enough to make his actors hit others in the head with a fucking metal hammer. And in an interview with Toby Hooper, he confirms this when he talks about filming Kirk's death scene, where he states, quote, "Well, that hammer was switched. Right before Bill Vale, the actor who plays Kirk, gets hit with it, we switched it with a rubber hammer. But Gunnar hit him so hard with it, he really knocked him down. Bill had a big welt on his eye." Unquote. Which, wow, that's a lot of strength. But also, it's proof of what I said about having two hammers. And it also confirms that the fake one was made of rubber. And additionally, Robert also specified on his old website that the hammer was made from foam rubber and latex. Now that we know what the head of the hammer is made of, let's move to the handle of the stunt hammer. As we can see in these photos, the handle is clearly tubular, almost like a pipe. And as you can see in this particular photo of Leatherface, that was signed to Buckethead of all people, Gunner's finger is inside the handle of the hammer, proving it is hollow, just like a pipe. And additionally, in a Facebook post made by the current owner of the screen-used stunt hammer, you can see that the handle is made of metal because it's rusty as shit. So it must be a metal pipe, right? I mean, it would be cheap and efficient, yeah. But you know what is more cost efficient? Reusing trash, of course. So, okay, you will have to trust me on this one. In a YouTube video that is related to TCM that I can't find for the life of me, the creator revealed that one of the cast members of the film, I think it was either Ed Neal or John Dugan, said in an interview that the handle used for a Leatherface's hammer was originally a broom handle. And that got me thinking, how could that be? We saw the photos before that the handle of the hammer is hollow, is tubular, and made of metal, just like a pipe. So how could it be a broom handle? Then I started looking at set photos again and see if I missed something. And wouldn't you know it, on this wholesome photo of Leatherface and Kirk chilling on the back of the house, you can clearly see that there is a hole in the handle of the hammer. Now, I need you to put your tinfoil hat on. You know what else is tubular, hollow inside, made of metal, and has a round hole in it? A telescopic broom handle, of course. I mean, it fits all the previous criteria and also the new one of being a fucking broom handle. The only counter to this is that I was unable to find the hole in the recent photo of the screen-used stunt hammer. But the angle that the photo was taken in could have obstructed the hole. So I'll leave it as inconclusive for now. But anyway, the only difference between it being a metal pipe and a telescopic broom handle is that there is a damn hole in it. A really small one at that. So it doesn't really matter. Just get whatever the fuck works for you. Now let's move to the size of the hammer. This was kinda tricky to find since there are no photos of the hammer next to a mass-produced product that has a consistent measurement. So what I had to do was use the next most reliable measurement unit I could find, that being Gunnar Hansen's hands, of course. At the time I had started looking for the measurements of the hammer, I already had found most of the measurements of a standard Poland 245A, including the width of its handlebar, which is about 2 centimeters. So, I used a photo of Hansen holding the handlebar of the chainsaw and adjusted so that a 2 centimeter line would fit the width of the handlebar. After adjusting the scaling, I measured Gunnar's hand so that I could have a reference to adjust the scale of the hammer without relying on other objects. After that, I copy and pasted the hand measurement on the photo of Gunnar holding the hammer, and adjusted the scale until it all fit well. After adjusting the scale of the hammer photo, I then measured the handle of the hammer, and it's about 2 centimeters wide, and for the length, I believe it's about 50 centimeters tall. And I say believe because I can't know for sure with the hammerhead obstructing the top. But the reasoning for my estimate is because, as you can see in this second view photo of Leatherface and Kirk, the handle doesn't appear to go all the way to the top of the hammerhead, being a bit sunken in. And my other reason is that most of the time when a factory is manufacturing a product, they like to use whole numbers to minimize variables. And the best measurement I could find that fits this criteria was 50 centimeters. And using that same scaling method on a poster photo, I was able to find out that the hammerhead is about 16 centimeters long, 5 centimeters wide, and 5 centimeters tall. With all the estimated measurements, I was able to make a diagram of the hammer for all of you to use and try to make replicas. So I hope you give it a try. I made my prop hammer using a PVC pipe with the same measurements of the handle and a EVA foam hammerhead I made using the template. Then I painted both of them a matte black color and rubbed some graphite powder on the hammerhead to give it that gunmetal finish. If you want to build a hammer to use at conventions, then yeah, I recommend using a PVC pipe and just paint it a rusty color. This way it's safer than using an actual rusty aluminum pipe. Anyway, for the hammerhead, instead of using rubber foam or EVA foam or whatever the fuck, I recommend you use silicone rubber since it's more resistant to both time and wear. You can dye the silicone black, then use graphite powder to give it a metallic finish. Para vocês assistindo, a Redelize vende uma borracha de silicone preta que é feita exatamente para replicar a firmeza de borracha normal. Vou ser bem sincero, eu não usei essa porra não, tá ligado? Mas parece ser boa. A porra da outra borracha que eu usei deles aí funcionou, então essa merda aí deve funcionar também. Então vejam aí o que funciona para vocês. As of today, I was unable to find any information on the screen-used real hammer. But, as for the screen-used stunt hammer, it is currently in the possession of a Facebook user called Roy Rose. He is the current owner of the original gas station from the movie. He made the place accessible to the public by turning it into a TCM tourism spot. It has a gift shop, t-shirts, signed photos, replica props, and of course, screen-used props. He in fact bought a bunch of artifacts from the movie to display at the gas station. So, if any of you go there to visit and you happen to see the hammer, be sure to take a photo of it and send it to me. That would be really cool. This is a late update on the subject. After a deeper look into this, I am unsure if he still owns the hammer. What I mean is, at the start of the year, a project was announced by Roy himself that the original Black Maria cattle truck from the movie was found in a barn and was recovered. With the truck now in Roy's possession, he was going to try and restore it to its former glory. And to do that, he needed the help of the community to fund the project. So he started a Indiegogo page with the goal of $50,000. Anyway, fast forward to now, and I was trying to find info on the truck, and apparently the official Facebook group for the project was shut down. The Indiegogo page was closed along with the funds, and no more updates were given on the matter. This was really sudden and weird, so I decided to look further. And this is what I found. The truck is being sold on eBay right now. Not only that, Roy is selling a ton of stuff from his collection on eBay, which is really strange since he seemed to want to exhibit them at the gas station. Well, I was informed that he was allegedly sued by an employee of Kim Henkel and Vortex Inc., who owns the rights to the movie, for allegedly using the name of the movie for financial gain. No joke. Like, Do you fucking understand where that gas station is from? Of course he's gonna use the name of the fucking movie. Like, what? You want him to just sell shirts that say, that movie from Texas? What are you talking about? Man, you people at Vortex must be a bunch of fucking goofy ass clowns. I don't give a fuck about no. They're abusing our copyright. Like, shut the fuck up, dude. There's no reason for a grown ass man not to act like such in 2024. Some of y'all at Vortex turning 80 real soon. So, you should stop acting a fool. Cause there's no reason not to resolve this in any other way that doesn't involve jumping head first into a fucking lawsuit. Cause if Roy sells that fucking gas station, you know that it's gonna get in the hands of a fucking complete stranger. And for all you know, that fucking gas station from that movie could just explode and turn into a fucking golf course for some old ass motherfuckers. So stop playing stupid games. I'm telling you, you don't want to fucking destroy another monument of your fucking movie. Anyway, as of now, I am unsure if Roy still owns the hammer. So, yeah. The chainsaw is the second weapon Leatherface uses in the movie, and even though it only has one kill to its name, with Franklin, it's still the most iconic, and it's easy to see why. It's such a violent, loud, and horrifying tool that can turn anyone into mincemeat, being used to this very day in other pieces of horror media due to the cultural impact of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And the chainsaw was the very reason the movie was even conceived. Tobe Hooper once told the story of how he came up with the idea for the film. And it was when he was stuck at a crowded mall. Because he was Christmas shopping, of course. And when he started getting impatient, something caught the corner of his eye. A chainsaw that was on full display at the mall. And Toby thought to himself, quote, "This is a no-brainer. What a way to get out of this store," unquote. Needless to say, he didn't go through with it, and instead, he used the idea to create the script for the film. Anyway, let's talk about the chainsaw used in the movie. The chainsaw used in the movie was undoubtedly a Poland 245A. To be more specific, it was a early model 1971 to 1973 barn yellow Poland 245A. Some of you might not know what I mean by this, and don't worry, I will explain. In 1970, the Poland brand released the Poland 245A chainsaw. This chainsaw, at the time, was their top-of-the-line product. The Poland 245A was a very distinct chainsaw. It had a unique greenish-yellow paint job. The clutch cover had a sticker with the Poland brand running horizontal right in the middle. The handlebar had a thin rubber coating right at the top. And it came with a 16-inch hard-tipped guide bar that had a horizontal black line design. In the 1970 first-run models, the gas tank cover had a gas cap right under the handlebar. The Poland 245A was produced and sold like this until 1973. In February of 1973, James M. Conley Jr. became the president of the Poland company. And in March, it was announced that the company was bought and acquired by Emerson Electronics Co. With this change in leadership, changes were made to the way Poland chainsaws were manufactured, causing the transition from early models to the newer models. Most Poland 245A chainsaws you will see nowadays are the newer models. You will know they are the newer models because they have this characteristic lime green paint job. And the clutch cover sticker now has the Poland brand in a arch at the very top. The handlebar now is highly covered with a thick rubber foam material, and the 16-inch hard-tipped guide bar now has a different design. The reason you see more of these newer models around is in part because they were mass-produced from 1973 to 1980, and because they were made with better materials and structuring. The complete opposite of the early models of the Poland 245A, which were only produced for 3 years and lacked in quality because their frames were really thin in specific points and were really fragile and would break and crack easily due to the fact they were made from magnesium, a really brittle and lightweight metal that was really cheap and popular during that time. And because of their fragility, most of them broke down and were thrown away and buried in landfills. Keep this information in mind when we move to the next part, as it is important to the story of the screen-used chainsaw. Now that we know the difference between a early and newer model Poland 245A, and have identified the chainsaw Leatherface uses as being the early model, we can move on and talk about the full lifetime of the screen-used chainsaw. In 1973, because they were on a tight budget, they needed to abuse every opportunity to save money. So Kim Henkel borrowed the saw from a local forester in Austin, who apparently also volunteered to help on the set from time to time, which unsurprisingly went unpaid. Anyway, the chainsaw was with Kim and Toby for the remainder of filming, where it was used and abused to its maximum. Both Gunnar and Toby described the deteriorating condition of the saw, saying that it would always start on the first pull. But then they say that, quote, "We started having problems because we started taking the clutch out," unquote. Meaning that as filming went on, they would need to make changes to the chainsaw depending on what the scene called for. They would take the clutch cover out because it was well documented that they had 2 different chains for different filming conditions. One with the teeth intact for close-up shots, and one with the teeth filed out for further away scenes. They would also sometimes use the chainsaw with no chain at all. But aside from the alterations made to the chainsaw for filming, the saw would also suffer a lot of physical damage due to the unfavorable filming conditions. To be specific, the chainsaw fell hard on the ground multiple times during production, sometimes accidentally, and sometimes very intentionally. But through it all, surprisingly, the chainsaw was still functional. So when they wrapped up filming, the chainsaw was given back to its owner, the local Austin forester, who used it for its intended purpose of cutting down trees for about another year and a half, until the chainsaw broke down completely and never turned back on. And subsequently, it was thrown away and buried at an unknown landfill in Austin, where it stays to this very day, submerged under 50 years worth of trash. And that's pretty much it for the screen-used chainsaw. Now, if you're planning on getting a Poland 245A for yourself, then you're gonna have to search hard to find one. And the search will be way harder if you want an early model, just like the one in the movie. I recommend you keep an eye on eBay, since they pop up there from time to time. But you can also try your luck asking to buy one on a TCM Facebook group. But don't expect much. Some of the people there are kind of weird. There are members of these groups that claim to have like 30 plus Poland 245A chainsaws in their collection. And they openly say they don't plan on selling any at all. Anyway, if you find a complete 245A for a good price, even if it's the newer model, I recommend you just get it. And even if some parts are missing, you can always just buy loose parts on eBay and shit. So, okay. If you got a newer model Poland 245A and you want to get it to look like the early model, I can give you some tips on the alterations you're gonna need to make to get it to look just like the one in the movie. Rapidamente eu queria dizer que não vale a pena comprar motosserra no Brasil, pois para você poder portar e usar elas, você precisa que ela seja registrada no governo. Então, infelizmente é uma bosta. To make a newer model Poland 245A look like the early model type, you will need the vintage design that was present on both sides of the 16-inch hard-tipped guide bars that came stock with every Poland 245A. I made a template for this design using reference from the real thing. You can use the template to make the stencil for painting. The next thing you will need is the early model filter cover, because they have a unique sticker at the top. I have also made a replica file for this sticker, using reference photos of the real thing, and used the same exact age-appropriate fonts. So, you can print the sticker and use it on your filter cover. After that, you will need the early model clutch cover, because they also have a sticker that is unique to that model. And you guessed it, I made a replica file for the exact sticker using reference photos of the actual thing. I also used the sticker made by Crystal Lake Creations as a starting base. Anyway, print the sticker and use it on your clutch cover. By the way, all the files should be scaled 1:1 with the real counterparts. But if you need to adjust the size, you can easily change them since they are saved as PDFs. After getting the decals, the next step is the handle. You will need to remove the foam rubber from the handle completely and replace it with black Plasti-Dip for the rubber coating on the top. The original handles were most likely coated in Plastisol, but Plasti-Dip doesn't need to be heated to dry, so it is easier to work with. I recommend you get a container with the same height as where the rubber grip ends. Fill it with black Plasti-Dip and dip the handle in it straight down. I recommend this because this seems to be the way they were originally made. Repeat this process a couple of times to get a good amount of layers, and that should be it for the handle. Lastly, you will just need to strip the paint off every part of the chainsaw that is painted lime green and replace it with the correct early model yellowish green to complete the look. To easily get this exact color, you can just go to a paint shop and have them match the exact color on the stickers I've made. I say this because I used the exact color from Crystal Lake Creations' latest version sticker. So, thank you Crystal Lake Creations for allowing people to use his stickers to make their own. So yeah, use this exact color to paint your chainsaw, and then you add your stickers. After doing all of this, you will have yourself a pretty good stock early model Poland 245A replica. Now, if you want to make this replica look like the one from the movie, you will need to do the following. You will completely remove the filter cover sticker, just leaving the sticker residue behind. Next, you're gonna weather away the design on the guide bar and make it look dirty as shit from the burnt oil stains and shit. Then, you're gonna put some 1-inch wide electrical tape over the Poland branding on the clutch cover sticker. And after all of this, you're just gonna wear down the paint all around so that it looks like the one from the movie. For that, I recommend you use reference photos and do it to your liking, because it's a lot of weathering. So when the weathering is done, you should have yourself a pretty good Texas Chainsaw Massacre Poland 245A replica. For those who just want a prop chainsaw to use at conventions, I recommend you get the Trick or Treat Studios replica chainsaw. It's really good looking and it's motorized, but just beware that it's smaller than the real thing. So you will have to size down the stickers if you want to customize it. You can also make a prop chainsaw yourself. However you do it is completely valid, because it's a pretty complicated object, and I have no clue how I would do it. Maybe in the future I'll make a 3D model for it, but for now this is all I got. But even if you don't have a chainsaw, a good costume can overshadow that, so don't worry too much about it. Yeah, this should be all for the chainsaw. If you're hearing this, you have reached the end of the video, and you must be as interested in the topic as I am. For you to sit through this amount of content while listening to my slow-ass voice, you must really like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre as I do. And if you're hearing this, it's also proof that I was finally able to make and release this fucking video. This was almost 2 years worth of research compressed into a comprehensive cosplay guide. And all the materials I have found and used in this video will be made available in the description below. You better fucking give it a look, I swear. Like, finding all this information was not easy. If you think the screen community is unwelcoming, this shit is not for you. There are no forums, no good archives, no dedicated YouTube channels, nothing. All you're going to find are outdated websites with good information for the time period where they were made, and private Facebook groups where you can find scraps of important information and people who don't feel like sharing shit. All of this you saw in this video was from me looking in every nook and cranny of the internet for the most obscure pieces of information. It was frustrating as hell, dude. I just hope this long ass fucking video helps someone make their costume without going insane. I really wish the Texas Chainsaw Massacre community wasn't like this, because this movie is so fucking amazing, dude. It's like the true father of slasher horror, and everything involving it is so interesting to learn about, dude. The cast, the crew, the production stories, the pre-production stories, the fucking post-production stories, the lawsuits, the promotional materials, the filming locations, even the fucking games, the documentaries, everything. Everything is so magical and surreal to learn about. And I bet that if it got the shine it deserved, it would be a community bigger than any other, even the Michael Myers one. But unfortunately, this isn't the reality we live in. And unfortunately, what we have is not really a community. It's much more like a market, because everyone is so fucking antisocial unless it's beneficial to them to say shit. And that's so fucking sad, dude. Truly. Anyway, hope you liked the video, like and subscribe and all that shit. And if you have any questions, just hit me up on IG and I'll respond as soon as I can. Oh, and by the way, just to let y'all know, if you think you're important or special because you own exclusive shit, or because you know important information but keep it from the public, You need to jump off a cliff now.
I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck. I'm willing to die for this shit. I done cried for this shit. Might take a life for this shit. Put the Bible down and go out for a knife for this shit. DOT, my enemy, won't catch a vibe for this shit. Ayy, I been stumped out in front of my mama. My daddy commissary made it to commas. Bitch, all my grandma's dead, so ain't nobody praying for me. I'm on your head. Ayy. 30 millions later, know the feds watching. Auntie on my telegram, like, be cautious. I be hanging out at Tams, I be on Stockton. I don't do it for the gram, I do it for Compton. I'm willing to die for this shit, nigga. I take your fucking life for this shit, nigga. We ain't going back to broke, family selling dope. That's why you ninny ass rap niggas better know.